ladies. This is Bob Hickman. Well, here I am. I'm back home. Had a great time visiting with my mom, and you guys seem to enjoy the videos I put out while I was down there. We did some travel magic videos, and that's always a lot of fun. And if you didn't see those videos, those are the last two videos in the queue. So definitely check those out. You'll get some travel magic tips. Yesterday we did a wonderful one on string magic. And that was a lot of fun. So I think you'll enjoy that. So definitely check it out, okay? Well, here we are. It's Monday. You know, Monday is the day of the moon. And when we talk about lunar things, that deals with the inner self, the soul. And a lot of people have been writing to me and saying, Psychic Bomb, is reincarnation real? Will you talk about that? What does it mean? Have I lived before? Well, you know, I can't speak for you, but I can tell you I have lived before. And I think it might be even safe to say if I've lived before, there's a really good chance that you've lived before as well. You know, reincarnation is such a big subject. In fact, I might have to do this as a two-part series because I don't think I'll get it all in one day. But reincarnation, now let's look at that word. That's a big word. Reincarnation. What that means is incarnate means in a body, in a fleshly form. Reincarnate means in a fleshly form again. So when we talk about reincarnating or reincarnation, we're talking about taking on a new body. Now, of course, this presupposes the idea that there's something to take on a body. And this is where, for some people, the challenge comes in, because what we're really talking about when we talk about reincarnation isn't just the body. We're talking about the soul. The soul is the animating principle. It is the presence of life. And it's believed by many all over the world that that essence, that self, that conscious self, transcends death. So that when your body dies, whether through a car accident or a heart attack or old age, your mind, your thoughts, who you are, you feel, the way you are, that will never actually cease to exist. But it will go back to the source, back to Creator. And when the timing is right, it will re-enter into a new body. Now, that body might be on Earth, or it could even be on another planet. I've met many people over the years who have told me, Bob, I'm reincarnated from the Venusians, or I'm reincarnated from the Pleiadians. And you know what? As a psychic, when I look into it, I do find truth there. So, you know, don't get hung up on the idea that the soul has to come back in this, immediate, right after death. Sometimes, people are between lifetimes for hundreds of years, and sometimes people come back instantly. It's really interesting because if we consider the idea that there is an eternal self, it makes sense that reincarnation could be a possibility. You know, it's funny, here in the Western world, nobody really thinks about it. You know, when Shirley MacLaine, many years ago, which I got her book here, this got me first thinking about reincarnation, Out on a Limb. I read this back in the 1980s when it first came out. And it was so interesting because everybody on the talk show, she was doing talk show circuit to promote her book here, this book. And you really need to get this. A lot of people were mocking her. Oh, Shirley MacLaine's flipped out. She's out there. But I can tell you she's not flipped out. She's not out there. She's truly grounded in her viewpoints. And you know what's so interesting is the people in the West acted like that was so quirky. But literally about 3/4 of the world actually believe in reincarnation. And the Western quarter of the world is the only one that seems to have forgotten this concept. You know, it's so interesting. The whole history of reincarnation goes back, well, way before the time of the Western world even, to the ancient world. The Aborigines of Australia, which are a very ancient race, believe in reincarnation. All of Asia, India, China, all the rest of Asia believes in reincarnation. And this is, a truth that I think is so profound. For a long time, I used to think, I don't know, I'm not sure about reincarnation. I certainly believed in a soul, and I believed that the soul went on. But reincarnation, I hadn't yet got my head around it. But I tell you, that changed later on in my life when I had a near-death experience. And all I can say is that when I was in the light, I had a near-death experience or a car accident. I was in the presence. Now on Earth time is probably 5 seconds, but over there's no time, so it's very different. But I was in the presence of beings that I knew. Like when I went to the light, there were people, now I don't know them in this life. I have no idea who they are. Some of them I know that I knew from the spiritual before I was born. And some of them were people from former incarnations. And it was so strange because when I got there, people would talk to me and they said, "Oh, Bob, it's good to see you've come back finally." I said, "Finally, we come back." And somebody said to me, "Well, you've been here before. You've done this." And I said, "I have." And the more I stood there looking at these spiritual beings that looked like real people, solid, real people, but it was spiritual, I had an awakening, an awareness that I had lived before and I had done this. And it all started to come back to me. Now, of course, when I came back to my body, a lot of what I remember I forgot. But I can tell you for all assuredness that I know inside that I have died before. I have been in the light before. I have been on earth before. And so my opening to reincarnation took some time, but when I really got it, I got it. Reincarnation isn't something that you have to believe. It's a concept to play with. And it's something that I think is really worth exploring. Nowadays what's so fascinating, there are many scientific studies that are exploring reincarnation. In my own home state of Virginia, there is the University of Virginia, and there is an entire department that is now devoted to studying reincarnation. It was headed by the late Dr. Ian Stevenson, who died a few years ago. I read his book, and I wish I can't find it today, but I'll dig it up for the next video. But he wrote a book about reincarnation experiences of children that he had studied. And he traveled the world and recorded and documented and experimented with these children. And he was able to actually validate that these children could prove things of a former life that they had no way of knowing. In my own work as a psychic, I found this to be true as well. Now, I may not have all the backing of the University of Virginia, but I'll tell you, my clients who sit with me, many of them have had very vivid memories. And as a psychic, I can see into the past and confirm. Many times people will come to a reading with me and they'll say, I don't know about this. And I'll say, well, you had a former life doing such and such and such. And their jaws drop and they're like, oh, Bob, I've had that feeling all my life. I've had a recurring dream, they say. And you see, I've tapped in on something that their soul knows. You see, the idea is that really, if we think about within us is all the memory of all of those lives. So it's not like some weird concept. It's our own knowing. So people say, well, how do I know about my past lives? Well, the secret is you have to go within. Look within. See what resonates, what comes up. Pay attention in your life because sometimes things will happen that you'll be going someplace and you'll have a flash, an insight, as if you've been there before. This interestingly happened to me many years ago. I was living in England in the early 1990s, and I took a bus trip one day up to York, York Cathedral, famous York, England. And I had never been to York in my life. And I had the most profound experience. I was by myself that day. And as I stepped off of the bus into York, it's like I knew the whole town. I knew where everything was. I knew if I went down 3 blocks and turned right, there'd be a grocery store. And I knew if I went the other way, there was going to be a bookstore. Now, I had no map of York, had never read one, didn't have one with me currently, and yet I knew. And as I walked through that town, if any of you have been to York, England, or maybe some of you watching live in York, you know, it's a very old town. It has a lot of its medieval history still intact. And I remember as I walked through that town of York, hauntingly familiar. It was so hauntingly, like I knew that I had lived there. I don't remember much beyond that. I didn't know how I died or if it was necessarily a happy or a sad life. It didn't feel tragic, so I'm thinking it was probably very much just a normal, ordinary, everyday life. You know, not all of us get to live grand, heroic lives. Sometimes the best lives are just the simple, ordinary ones. But in that life in York, I know that I lived in that town, and many parts of the old historic town are still exactly the same as they were. I had a sense that I had lived there in the like 14 or 1500s. It was so strangely familiar, so haunting to me. And I'll never forget going in York Cathedral. I remember walking through it, and it seems so amazingly familiar as well. So, you know, I guess that got me thinking about reincarnation more deeply. And then when I had my near-death experience just a few years after that, I became a confirmed believer. You know, in this book, in Shirley MacLaine's book, she says something here. I thought I'd just read some of her thoughts about reincarnation and the soul. She says, and this is in her chapter, which chapter is this? Chapter 3, 4? I don't remember now. Let's see if I can find it. I think it's chapter 2. And she says, I'm going to read some of this to you. That night I found myself looking up reincarnation in the encyclopedia. Let me say that I was not brought up to be a religious person. My parents sent me to church and Sunday school, but it was because it was the accepted place to be on Sundays. I wore crinoline petticoats and tried not to glance too often at the lyrics in the hymnal I was supposed to have memorized. I wondered where the money went after the collection plate was passed. But I really never had any feeling one way or another whether there was a God or not. Jesus Christ seemed like a smart, wise, and certainly a good man, but I viewed what I learned about him in the Bible as philosophical, mythological, and somehow detached. What he preached and did didn't really touch me, so I didn't believe or disbelieve. He just happened, like all of us. And he did some good things a long time ago. I took his being the Son of God with a grain of salt, and in fact, by the time I was in my late teens, had decided for myself that God and religion were definitely mythological, and if people needed to believe in it, that was okay with me, but I just couldn't. I couldn't believe in anything that had no proof, and besides, I wasn't all that antagonized by the need for a purpose in life, or something to believe in besides myself. In short, where religion, faith in God, or the immortality of the soul were concerned, I did not think much about them. No one insisted, and I found the subject boring, not nearly so stimulating as something real and harmonious like people. Every now and then, as I grew older, I would engage in a bemused argument over the pitfalls of such mythological beliefs and how they detracted from the real plight of the human race. I didn't much like the authoritarianism of the church, any church, and I considered it dangerous because it made people afraid they would burn in hell if they didn't believe in heaven. But as much as I was disinterested in God and religion and the hereafter, there was something that I was extremely interested in. From the time I was very young, I was interested in identity. My identity and that of everyone I met. Identity seemed real to me. Who was I? Who was anyone? Why did I do the things that I did? Why did they? Why did I care about some people and not others? The analysis of relationships became a favorite subject of mine. And the relationship I had with myself as well as with the others. So maybe because I was interested in the origin of my own identity, it intrigued me that there might be more to me than what I was aware of in my conscious mind. Perhaps there were other identities buried deep in my subconscious that I only needed, that I only needed to search for and to find. Indeed, many times in my work and self-expression, whether dancing, writing, or acting, I would be amazed at myself, baffled as to where a feeling or a memory or an inspiration had come from. I had put it down to a hazy concept called the creative process, as did most of my fellow artists. But I have to admit that at the bottom of whoever I was, I felt a flame that I was not able to understand, to touch. What was the origin of that flame? Where did it come from? And what had come before it? I was always more interested in what went before than what might come after. So for that reason, I suppose I wasn't so interested in what would happen to me after I died, as I was in what made me the way I was. Therefore, when the notion of life before birth first struck me, I guess you might say I was curious to explore it. The encyclopedia said that the doctrine of reincarnation went far back as far as recorded history. It consisted of belief in the connection of all living things and the gradual purification of the soul or spirit of man until it returned to the common source and origin of all life, which was God. It was the belief that the soul was immortal and embodied itself time and time again until it morally worked out the purification of itself. It said that the companion subjects of karma, that is, working out one's inner burdens, and reincarnation, the physical opportunity to live through one's karma, were two of the oldest beliefs in the history of mankind, and more widely accepted than most any religious concepts on earth. This was news to me. I had always vaguely connected reincarnation with disembodied spirits, hence ghosts, the occult, and things that go bump in the night. I had never connected it with any major, serious religion. Anyway, so that's just a little snippet. We'll go more into that. But, it's interesting. And I feel like kind of like Shirley MacLaine in that sense that when I first encountered reincarnation, I wasn't sure what to make of it. But, it's said that, I think it was Voltaire said, if there is a soul, then it's no more absurd that it should be born once than be born many times. I think I got that backwards. It's no more absurd that it should be born many times any more than it is that it should be once. And I think that's really true because we are not the body ultimately. Ultimately, we are the spirit and the soul. I've met Hindu priests over the years who said to me, you are not this body. You are Atma. You are spirit soul. And I used to think, okay. And then I got to thinking, if that's really true, that explains so much about life. A lot of these things we think are random encounters. When we meet somebody and they change our world, maybe that's karma. Maybe we're meant to cross paths. Do our souls know each other? I think they do. And I think that when we have those moments of insight where we realize that we are more than just the body, and that we realize that inside of us potentially lies consciousness of many selves that has knowledge of places, languages, people, situations we've never seen in this life, and yet it's all within. It's a subject that I believe in these days, but it's not one that I think you have to believe in. I think reincarnation is something that you do better to take your time with, to study, to play with the concept. Scott Cunningham in his book, Wicca, A Guide for the Solitary, has a whole chapter called The Spiral of Rebirth. And actually, we're going to read more of that tomorrow. I think I've read enough to you today. But we'll talk about this in tomorrow's video. Actually, it'll be on Wednesday, not tomorrow. Tomorrow's Tuesday, so tomorrow will be messages from this spirit world. Wednesday, we'll continue reincarnation. But we're going to talk more about that from the Wiccan perspective on Wednesday. Perfect subject on Wiccan Wednesday. But I just want to come here to share this concept with you. Let's start a conversation. Some of you may say, Psyche Bob, I believe in an eternal soul, but I don't believe in reincarnation. And listen, you can express that here. I used to be the same way. When I was a member of the Spiritualist Church before I became a Wiccan, the Spiritualist Church did not teach reincarnation in those days. The old-time Spiritualists said, basically, you die, you go on to the spirit world, you progress in the spirit world. But then there was a shift. The Spiritualist Church started discovering truths of reincarnation. I think today they're now allowing reincarnation, at least in certain branches. But no matter, as Shirley MacLaine says, it doesn't matter about the authoritarianism of the church. What really matters is our identity. So today I ask you, have you ever looked within? Have you ever thought about who you are? Are you an eternal soul? What makes you you? These days when I go to funerals, and it seems I go to more and more these days as I get older, a lot of my mentors have passed, a lot of the older people I know are passing. And many people go to viewings. We have this kind of morbid tradition. I don't understand it still, where they put the body out and everybody looks at it, called the viewing. I used to hate the viewing. I used to think it was the most morbid and disgusting thing. I still find it a little strange, to be honest. I'm not sure I get that concept. But the one thing that a viewing does when I go to a funeral and I see the body in the casket is it really, for me, reaffirms what I really know. That person in that pine box isn't really there. There's a shell there, but the person that animated that form, is not here. Where did that person go? I believe they went off to another realm, to the spirit realm. And really, the spirit realm's not far, far away. It's just close as our breath. It's just at a different frequency. But nowadays, I don't get traumatized at funerals because I see the body and I say, interesting case. You see, people don't love the body. People love the soul. That's what we're attached to. If you truly love the body, then when you see a person in the casket, you'd be wanting to keep them close. And some people, unfortunately, still have that concept of the body. But when you're a spiritual person and you say, that's not them, there's an absolute awareness of the disconnection between the body and the soul. I find it very powerful. So if you have to go to a funeral anytime, I want you to think about that. I want you to look at that body and say, where are they? They're not there. And that's just, the body is decay. So we are not really the body. We are spirit soul. These bodies are just costumes we wear to cloak the soul to experience a different reality. Anyways, well, listen, I'll keep it a little short. I know I'm going long, but, I just want to start a discussion. And we're going to talk on Wednesday more about reincarnation. We're going to talk about different theories, about transmigration. We're going to get more in depth. But for now, I just wanted to get that conversation going. So tell me in the box below, do you believe in reincarnation? Have you ever had glimpses that you might have lived before? If so, what was that like? What was your experience? On Wednesday, we're going to talk more specifically about how to get in touch with that. If you have never experienced that, there are techniques we can talk about on Wednesday that'll help you discover who you might have been. So definitely be here. So tell me in the box below, okay? Have you ever lived before? Do you think you have? Who might you have been? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Well, guys, thanks for being here. I love you. Keep it here at Spirit Channel. By the way, if you haven't done so, Hit subscribe. Be part of our channel. We'd love you to be here. Like this favorite. Share it with your friends. Let's get out the word about Spirit Channel. Well, be back here tomorrow for messages from the spirit world. You guys rock. We'll see you then. Blessed be.